Have you ever wondered, what should my blood pressure be as I get older? Blood pressure is often labeled as high or low based on general guidelines. But do these numbers change with age? After all, it's common for blood pressure to rise as our arteries stiffen over time. So, is there an ideal blood pressure for older adults? What is considered normal may not be what you think. For years, we've known that high blood pressure is harmful, and to manage it, doctors prescribe medications to lower it. In 2017, the American College of Cardiology, American Heart Association released updated guidelines redefining what's qualified as high blood pressure. Less than 120 over 80 millimeters of mercury is considered normal. If you have between 120 and 129 millimeters of mercury for systolic blood pressure and diastolic less than 80, they called it elevated blood pressure. And if you have systolic between 130 and 139 or diastolic between 80 and 89 millimeters of mercury, you have stage 1 hypertension. And anything above 140 over 90 is considered stage 2 hypertension. Before this, the threshold for hypertension was higher for older adults, allowing systolic readings up to 150 millimeters of mercury for those over 65. These new standards mean that if your systolic blood pressure is 130 millimeters of mercury or diastolic of 80 millimeters of mercury or higher, you are now considered hypertensive. And in the past, the numbers are completely different. When I went to medical school in Lisbon a long time ago, we were told there was this rule, 100 plus age. So if you were 65, it was okay to keep your systolic blood pressure 165. If you were 80 years old, it was okay to have a systolic blood pressure 180. And we were even warned not to lower blood pressure in older people because it could be dangerous. Things have changed significantly since then. Does age matter? Does one size fit all? The European Society of Cardiology 2024 guidelines suggest starting treatment at 140 over 90 millimeters of mercury for low-risk individuals and for those with high risk, age 85 or older. And the European Society of Hypertension recommends treatment for 140 over 90 for individuals less than 80 years old, but 160 for those over 80. Clearly, recommendations are all over the place. So why do some organizations advocate for more aggressive treatment? Others take a more relaxed approach. And here's a question a lot of people have. Are pharmaceutical companies influencing these targets to sell more drugs? And if you're wondering how to lower your blood pressure naturally without medications, watch this video, Top 10 Potassium-Rich Foods to Lower Blood Pressure Naturally. I'll put a link above and on the description below. Let's look at studies that changed the game. The push for stricter blood pressure control stems from landmark studies like the SPRINT study that was published in 2015. In this study, they looked over 9,000 plus patients age 50 or older, and they divided them in two groups. The standard treatment was systolic target at less than 140, and intensive treatment, systolic target less than 120 millimeters of mercury. And they follow these individuals for more than 3 years. And the intensive group had fewer heart attacks, fewer strokes, and lower mortality. And interesting enough, later on, they reviewed a subgroup of people on the study that were 75 or older, and the benefits were even greater. They had less strokes, less heart attacks, and lower mortality than the younger population. And now we have more data. There is a trial called the STEP trial, and they look at 8,000 plus Chinese adults between age 60 and 80. And this study showed that targeting blood pressure less than 130 as opposed to less than 150, again, reduced cardiovascular events, strokes, heart attacks, and they live longer. And just last year, 2024, there's another study that looked at 11,000 participants, including diabetics and stroke survivors that had been excluded from the prior trials. And they looked at, and the targets was systolic less than 120 versus systolic less than 140. And the takeaway, again, the same, was lower cardiovascular events, lower heart attacks, lower strokes, lower mortality on the group targeting a systolic less than 120 millimeters of mercury. So the takeaway is clear. Lowering your blood pressure reduces the heart attacks and strokes and your mortality, regardless of your age. As in fact, older you are, more benefits you get. Let's look at historical perspective and address the question if in fact is big pharma influencing these guidelines. Did you know that in the early 1900s, insurance companies refused policies to people who had high blood pressure? And they noticed a clear link between elevated blood pressure and premature death long before any effective treatments existed, long before big pharma existed. In fact, medications to lower blood pressure didn't come up until the 1950s. And Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance between 1907 to 1921 showed that each incremental increase in systolic blood pressure of 10 to 14 millimeters of mercury was associated with a 60% higher mortality risk. And if your systolic blood pressure exceeded 147 millimeters of mercury and you were between like 60 and 64, your insurance was denied. We clearly know that lower blood pressure is better long before big pharma existed. Let's address another important question. Is it normal for blood pressure increase with age? It's a fact that in the Western world, blood pressure does increase with age. But is there a population in modern times that doesn't use salt or eat processed foods or go out to eat? And what happened to their blood pressure? For that, you have to go deep into the Amazon rainforest, meet the Yanomamo people, and no salt culture. Low salt intake ever reported, which is to say normal for our species salt intake. So what happens to their blood pressure? They start with 100/60. As they get older, they still stay 100/60. Their blood pressure remains low throughout their entire lives. That's what is healthy. That's what's supposed to be normal. Now we know the lower blood pressure, the better, regardless of your age. But we still have to find the right balance. Your doctor has to look at your overall situation. If you're frail, if you're prone to falls, if you have some dementia, aggressive treatment may not benefit you. So today, the goal is aim for a LARA as low as reasonably achievable based on your personal circumstances. And just in case you're not ready to move to the Amazon rainforest and join the Yanomamo people, watch this video, top 10 tips to lower salt in your diet. I'll put a link above and on the description below. And remember, your health, your most precious asset, take control. See you next video.